July 4th, 1980. Missy celebrated Independence Day with her family. No one there could have known it was the last holiday they would ever spend with her. But by the next morning, no one had seen her. That's when worry turned into dread. Police received information about a body. What they found would haunt this family for generations. Missy's body lay in the grove. Her head had dirt kicked over it. Her dress and pantyhose had been removed. She had been sexually assaulted. She was 18 years old.
For 45 years, one man sat at every single family gathering, every holiday, every birthday, every quiet Sunday dinner, and not one person at that table knew he was the reason a chair would always be empty. He passed the food. He made the small talk. He watched a 19-year-old girl named Missy walk out the door for the last time in her life, and then he came back inside and finished his plate like nothing in the world had happened. For 4.5 decades, he lived free, he lived comfortable, he lived close enough to touch the very family he had destroyed, and none of them ever suspected the man across the table. Before this video is over, you are going to meet him. You are going to hear exactly how one discarded paper cup ended 45 years of silence. But first, I want to know where in the world you're watching this from, and what time it is right there, right now, as this story starts to unfold for you. Type it in the comments. Let's see how far this reaches tonight. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now, because the Cold Case Archive brings you real, verified cold cases every single week, cases built entirely from official police statements, court records, and confirmed reporting. And if you're already subscribed, do me one favor, hit the like button before you keep watching. It genuinely helps this channel keep telling these stories, and keep fighting to get victims like Missy the recognition they deserve. Alright. Let's go back to 1980. In the summer of 1980, in the Inland Empire, east of Los Angeles, California, there was an 18-year-old girl everyone called Missy. Her real name was Michelle Jones, but almost nobody used it. To her family, to her friends, to anyone who spent even a single afternoon with her, she was simply Missy. She was one of 8 children. Picture that for a second, 8 kids under one roof, a house that was probably never quiet, never still, always full of noise and movement and life. And in the middle of all of that, Missy was the one who held things together. She was the one who noticed when a younger sibling was upset before anyone else did. She was the one who stepped in when someone needed looking after. Her own sister would later describe her exactly that way, as the girl who took care of everybody, even when nobody asked her to. She had her own sense of style, her own way of putting herself together that people still remember decades later, without even trying. She had a smile, the kind of smile that people describe not because it was perfect, but because it was hers, and because it stuck with you. But underneath all of that warmth, underneath the version of Missy her family saw every day, something had started sitting heavy on her that summer. Something she hadn't fully said out loud to everyone yet. Something that, in hindsight, was the loudest warning sign anyone could have given. Earlier that same year, Missy had gone to stay for a short time with her older sister. Her sister was living in Rancho Cucamonga with her boyfriend, in a home the two of them shared together. Missy didn't stay long. She left, and she went straight to her mother. And what she told her mother was simple, and it was direct: the man made her uncomfortable. He wouldn't stop pursuing her. It didn't matter how clearly she said no, he kept coming back around her anyway. Think about how much courage that takes. An 18-year-old girl, telling her own mother that her sister's boyfriend, a man who was, in every practical sense, already part of the family, was making her afraid. And it wasn't only her mother who noticed. Missy's closest friend saw it too. One afternoon, the two of them were sitting together in a park, just talking the way teenage girls do, and his name came up in the conversation. And according to her friend, the change in Missy's face was instant. This wasn't a flicker of discomfort. This wasn't an awkward pause. Missy looked afraid. Genuinely, visibly afraid. So let's be completely clear about what Missy did in the months before she died. She didn't stay silent. She didn't keep it to herself. She told her mother. She told her best friend. She said his name out loud, more than once, to more than one person. And nobody followed up. Not that summer. Not for 45 years. On the 4th of July, 1980, the Jones family gathered together for a holiday barbecue. The location was that same house in Rancho Cucamonga, the house Missy's sister shared with her boyfriend. By every account, it was an ordinary family holiday. There was food cooking. There was laughter. There were 8 siblings and parents and everyone in between, spread out across a yard on a warm summer evening, the kind of gathering that happens in thousands of families every single 4th of July across the country. At some point during that evening, the boyfriend left the gathering. Nobody could say for certain where he went. He simply wasn't there for a stretch of time, and then, at some point, he was back. Later that night, Missy left too. Her youngest sister, only 11 years old at the time, watched her walk out through the front door. Missy was wearing a blue skirt and a blue top. She told her little sister she wouldn't be long. She never came back. The next afternoon, the 5th of July, 1980, a body was found in a grapefruit grove in South Fontana, California. The location was roughly 11 miles from the house where Missy's entire family had been gathered together just the night before, eating and laughing, with no idea that anything was wrong. It was Missy. She had been sexually assaulted. Investigators worked the scene and collected forensic evidence, including a biological sample that was preserved during the autopsy. But this was 1980. The scientific technology needed to actually process that kind of evidence into a usable identification simply did not exist yet. DNA testing, as we understand it and rely on it today, was still years away from being developed. There were no cell phones to trace. No security cameras on every corner. No digital footprint of any kind that investigators could pull from. Whatever they were going to solve, they were going to have to solve with witness accounts, physical evidence, and shoe leather police work, nothing else. Investigators pursued the most obvious lead first. Missy had been seeing a young man, and he was brought in, arrested, and questioned. Eventually, his account of that night held up, and he was released. Meanwhile, the boyfriend, her own sister's boyfriend, the man Missy had personally named as someone who frightened her, the same man who had vanished from the 4th of July gathering without explanation, was never once brought in for questioning. Not that week. Not that year. For decades, his name simply was not part of the investigation. The case went cold. The morning after Missy disappeared, before anyone in the family even fully understood that she was gone for good, her older sister walked into the upstairs bathroom of that Rancho Cucamonga house and noticed something strange. Her boyfriend's suit coat was hanging over the shower curtain rod. And caught on the fabric of that coat was a dried, barbed weed, the kind that grows wild across the open, dry fields of Southern California. In the closet nearby, his shoes sat caked in dried mud. She was only 19 years old at the time. She had no framework for understanding what she was looking at. She didn't know that a dead body would be discovered the very next day in a grove 11 miles away. All she knew was that something felt off, so she mentioned it to a family member, believing, reasonably, that it would eventually make its way to the police. It never did. That coat. That single dried weed caught in the fabric. Those muddy shoes sitting quietly in a closet. All of it sat there, unspoken and unexamined, for 40 years. The official case file went cold, the years passed, and an entire family aged without ever getting an answer. Missy's parents grew old. They lived out the rest of their lives never learning who had taken their daughter from them, never getting to see justice, never getting to close that door. And yet, every single year, the family still gathered to celebrate Missy's birthday. She never stopped being their sister. She never stopped being present in the family's traditions, even in her absence. Her older sister carried the memory of that bathroom for 4 decades. She carried the coat, the weed, the muddy shoes, the quiet, gnawing uncertainty of not knowing whether what she'd seen mattered, or whether, in hindsight, it might have changed absolutely everything. Now, if you're still watching at this point in the story, drop a comment right now with the words, "I'm still here." Let's see who is truly following this all the way through, because what happens next in this case is the part that changes everything. In the spring of the year 2020, a cold case corporal working with the Fontana Police Department was assigned to a joint cold case task force, working alongside detectives from the county sheriff's department. She had a simple, almost stubborn philosophy about old, unsolved files. Cold cases, she said, are about closing every open door you can find. If there's a door in front of you, you walk through it. And once you walk through it, you close it behind you, and you move to the next one. So she started working back through every single person who had ever been connected to Missy's life. Every friend. Every boyfriend. Every family connection. And eventually, she landed on a name that the original 1980 investigation had never properly examined at all. The boyfriend from the barbecue. New information eventually led the detective to Missy's sister, now a woman in her 60s, still carrying the weight of that summer with her. In June of the year 2020, the detective sat down with her, face to face. And for the very first time in 4 decades, investigators finally heard the whole picture. They heard about the suit coat hanging over the shower curtain. They heard about the dried, barbed weed caught in the fabric. They heard about the muddy shoes in the closet. And they heard, in an official capacity, for the very first time, about the harassment Missy had reported to her own mother, and about the fear her best friend had watched cross her face in a park, months before she died. None of it, not one piece of it, had ever made its way into the original case file back in 1980. Here's something important to understand. The biological evidence collected during Missy's autopsy in 1980 had already been processed years earlier at a regional DNA laboratory, once the technology became available. A genetic profile of her unknown attacker existed, and it had already been entered into the National DNA Database, waiting silently for a match. There had never been a match. The reason was simple: the suspect had no criminal record whatsoever. His DNA had never been collected by law enforcement for any reason, at any point in his life, so there was nothing in any database for the evidence to match against. Which meant investigators only had one real option left. If they wanted to connect this man to the crime, they needed to obtain a DNA sample from him directly, and they needed to do it without ever revealing why. So they made contact under a completely casual pretext. They reached out, mentioned Missy's name, and simply asked if he remembered her. He said that he did. And when he called back afterward, detectives invited him out to lunch. He said yes. And just like that, the quiet, careful plan was set into motion. The man's name was Leonard Nash. At the time of Missy's murder, back in 1980, he was 26 years old. He was dating Missy's older sister. He was living in that same Rancho Cucamonga home where the entire family had gathered together on the 4th of July. He was the man Missy had personally named to her own mother as someone who frightened her. He was the man whose presence made her best friend watch fear settle across her face in a park that summer. He was the man who disappeared from the barbecue that night without any explanation. And he was the man whose muddy shoes and weed-caught suit coat sat quietly in a closet the very next morning, while a family 11 miles away was discovering the worst news of their lives. For 40 years, he simply lived his life. He built a home in Las Vegas. He had no criminal record. There was nothing about him, on paper, that would ever make anyone look twice. At the lunch arranged by investigators, Nash showed up already holding a drink cup from a nearby restaurant. At some point during the ride, he poured water from a bottle sitting in the car into that very same cup. Over the meal, he spoke freely and openly. He admitted that he remembered dancing with Missy at the party all those years ago. But he denied any further involvement in what happened to her that night. When he eventually stepped away from the table, detectives moved in and collected everything he had touched. His fork. His napkin. His straw. And finally, the cup itself, recovered from the trash. Every single item matched the exact same DNA profile. And that profile matched the biological sample that had been carefully preserved from Missy's autopsy since 1980, with odds against coincidence stretching into the tens of septillions. Leonard Nash was arrested in September of the year 2020. He was extradited back to California to formally face charges for what he had done. The path to a conviction was not immediate, and it was not simple. An earlier trial actually ended without a verdict at all, the jury unable to reach a decision. Prosecutors regrouped, and they returned to court to try the case again. Finally, in November of the year 2025, 45 years after Missy Jones walked out that front door in her blue skirt and her blue top, a jury found Leonard Nash guilty. He was formally sentenced in January of the year 2026, and the following month, he began serving a sentence of 15 years to life, at a correctional facility in Southern California. Through all of it, he never explained why. He never described what actually happened that night. Whatever answer he has chosen to take it with him. Today, this case stands as the oldest cold case ever successfully prosecuted in the history of its county. Missy's youngest sister was only 11 years old the night she stood in that doorway and watched Missy walk out for the very last time. Decades later, speaking publicly about everything that had happened, she said it simply: her sister never came home. And while Leonard Nash went on to live his life for more than 50 additional years after that night, Missy only ever got 18. She had told the people around her that something was wrong. She had said his name, clearly, more than once, to more than one person who loved her. She had done everything that anyone could reasonably ask a frightened 18-year-old girl to do. It took 45 years for the rest of the world to finally catch up to what Missy had already known. If this case moved you the way it moved me while researching it, do 3 things right now before you leave. Hit the like button, so this story reaches more people who need to hear it. Drop a comment telling us which part of Missy's story hit you the hardest. And subscribe to the Cold Case Archive, because every single case we cover here gets the same treatment: real research, real records, and real respect for the people whose stories we're telling. We'll see you in the next one.